Not every mayoral race in Ontario has attracted international headlines as Toronto's has, but there's still plenty worth checking out. Joining us now for a look at some races outside of the province's capital city, in Sudbury, Ontario, via Skype, Eric White. He's the City Hall reporter for CBC Sudbury. In London, Ontario, via Skype, Ashton Paytas, who's reporter for Blackbird News in London. And with us here in studio, San Greywald, urban affairs reporter at the Toronto Star, and he's focusing on Peel region. And San, it's good to have you here in our studios, and thanks to the two of you for being there via Skype. Let's just put the map up if we can, Sheldon, to start out with, because we are looking at, yes, from north to south, Elliot Lake and Sudbury and Brampton and Mississauga and London. Those are the 5 races we have eyeballed as being, well, maybe not as interesting as the mayor's race in Toronto, but up there to be sure. So, Ashton, let's start with you. You're covering the race in London, Ontario. What makes that one worth watching?
London is very interesting, as a lot of people know. Our former mayor, Joe Fontana, was convicted of fraud and breach of trust. So he resigned. He's on house arrest right now. He was sentenced to 4 months house arrest. And we have really 2 front runners right now. It's a 2-person race. We have Paul Cheng, who describes himself as a businessman, and no one really knows a lot about him. He's never been to a city council meeting in his life. And then we have current councillor Matt Brown. So they're kind of neck and neck in the polls right now. The person in 4th place bowed out through his support behind Paul Cheng. So very tight right now. How is it that a person who's never been to a city council meeting in his life is running such a competitive campaign? He's the anti-politician. I think people want someone here who's not a politician, who is a businessman, who knows how to run a business because of London's history. They don't trust politicians. I mean, Joe Fontana was an MP, and that's the time that his fraud charges spring to. So he's had a 30-year run as a politician, and he was ousted for fraud. Now, had he not been convicted, I think he was planning to run again, was he not? Yeah, he did not resign until he was convicted. There's a lot of people calling for him to step down, for him to resign, but he stuck with it. He still went to council meetings until he was convicted and sentenced. Okay, let's move a little further east from where you are, west from where we are right now. San, you've got 2 good races that you're watching in Mississauga and Brampton. Let's start with the Mississauga one. What's the story there?
It was a close race up until about 2 weeks ago. Bonnie Crombie, former MP for Mississauga, a current city councillor, Steve Mahoney, a former MP for Mississauga, MPP, and one-time city councillor as well. We're running, pretty much a neck-and-neck race.
Both Liberals.
Both Liberals, yeah. A lot of similar ties, similar platforms, both close friends of Hazel McCallion's, the outgoing mayor after 36 years. And they were running pretty much neck-and-neck in the polls. Steve Mahoney had opened up a small lead, about 4%. And then Mayor McCallion came out about 2 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, and tacitly supported Miss Crombie. She said at a public event that was taped that she supported Bonnie Crombie's platform. The Crombie campaign ran with it. A poll was done right after that, and all of a sudden, Miss Crombie's has got a 25-point lead.
And you attribute that to the endorsement from Hazel McCallion?
I think it's skewed. I think the poll was done. There was a push poll that was done, which played up and talked up Bonnie Crombie and highlighted negative things about Mr. Mahoney right after Mayor McCallion's endorsement. I think with the timing of a fair bit of media coverage after Mayor McCallion gave Bonnie Crombie the support for her platform. So I think those things skewed that poll a bit, maybe quite a bit. I have a hard time believing it's a 25-point spread. My, ear to the ground, all of the communications I have with the people that are close to it, anecdotally, it still seems to me a very close race. And obviously an important 6th largest city in the country. A lot of it's a watershed time for Mississauga, and it really needs a strong leader who can work with all of council, Queen's Park, Ottawa. They've got 22 kilometers of waterfront development that's going to take place. Still a fair bit of build-up. Massive debt that they're facing in terms of their infrastructure deficit. How are they going to deal with that? So you need a leader who's going to come in there and really be able to take things, the baton from Hazel and take Mississauga to a new era.
One of the things that I have found striking about this campaign is that the 2 candidates seem to have so few differences on the major issues, and yet it is one of the bitterest fights out there right now. Why has it gotten so ugly?
Well, I think one of the reasons is because both candidates are so closely tied to a fairly insular circle of the political class. They're both very well connected to all of the councillors. And so, for example, both have tried to get the support from councillors. Mr. Mahoney got 5 sitting councillors to endorse him. Ms. Crombie got, like I said, the tacit support from the mayor. But, clear support for her platform from Mayor McCallion. So they're both going after essentially the same base for support. They're looking at the same base. And when you've got 2 very similar candidates, like you said, both liberals, card-carrying liberals, they've both represented the Liberal Party at higher levels of government, and they're both essentially fighting. It's almost a bit, it's like this cannibalistic, incestuous type of fight
okay,
that's going
Sam,
on.
hold back. Cannibalistic, maybe pushing it a bit. But let's recall, I think one of the endorsements that Steve Mahoney got from City Council was from his wife,
That's true.
who was a city councillor.
Yeah.
And I gather when she found out that Mayor McCallion had basically endorsed Mrs. Crombie, she was furious, right? She's been pretty upset about
Yeah,
that.
I have a story in today's Star that refers to that, and I did a story last week that referred to it. Katie Mahoney was that's Steve Mahoney's wife. She's been a councillor for 23 years, one of Mayor McCallion's closest friends. I've sat and covered council and watched them basically, support each other on issues. Katie Mahoney, when there was a lot of pressure on Mayor McCallion with the judicial inquiry into the mayor's dealings with a $1.5 billion project involving Mayor McCallion's son, Katie Mahoney came to the mayor's side. She testified at the inquiry in defense of the mayor. So Katie Mahoney has literally viewed this as a complete betrayal.
So why did Mayor McCallion step into a race which she was under no obligation to endorse anybody, so why did she?
Yeah, and she had said quite clearly for months that she was going to remain neutral. She was not going to pick sides. She told me quite recently, the mayor did, that no, what she had said all along is that she was not going to pick sides for now. Huh. And what puzzles me, your question, what's even more puzzling is the fact that their platforms are so similar. Outside of a few differences on the transit plan and one major difference in terms of how the waterfront development would be managed, their platforms are pretty much carbon copies of each other.
I think you remind me here. One transit plan is called Moving Mississauga, and the other one's called Mississauga Moves.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So why she chose between 2 things that are pretty much the same, I don't know.
Okay. Sit tight about Brampton. We'll come back to Brampton, but I don't want Eric to feel left out. So Eric, let's go up to Sudbury. The former mayor decided not to run again, so you've got an open slate there. How does the mayor's race look in Sudbury, Ontario?
Well, even though Marian Matchuk, the incumbent, isn't running again, it does feel a lot like the election in 2010, partially because the man she defeated, former mayor and former longtime member of parliament, John Rodriguez, is running again to get his job back. And his two main competitors are people running on a very similar platform to Matchuk, a sort of cost-cutting, cut the fat at City Hall platform. One of them is Matchuk's former, a good friend of hers, they say, and a former key member of her campaign, Dan Melanson, is running on a very similar platform to what she did, as is Auditor General Brian Bigger. So he is the city's Auditor General. He's taken a leave from his job to run, which is sort of unprecedented, but he's kind of running on a similar cut-the-fat sort of platform, and he has crystallized the campaign really by promising a zero tax percent increase in the first year, so a tax freeze, which many of his competitors don't think is possible.
I was just up in Sudbury actually a few days ago and then again a week or so ago. And let me tell you what I was hearing, and then you tell me if this makes any sense at all. You've got John Rodriguez, who's the former New Democrat MP, and then you've got 2 sort of center-right candidates who potentially could split that vote and let Rodriguez come up the middle. Does that handicap it? How does that jibe with your understanding of the handicapping of the race?
There's certainly been that theory tossed around, and it's interesting when the 2, as you say, center-right candidates, Melanson and Bigger, have been releasing polling information. It usually shows them in the lead, the other center-right candidate in third, and the one thing their polls agree on is that Rodriguez is in second. So some people have said they're kind of sending a message to the voters, if you don't want Rodriguez in, and obviously they didn't 4 years ago, vote for me and don't vote for the other guy. At the same time, though, the 4th candidate is Ron Dupuis, who's a longtime city councillor, former Liberal candidate. So some people have said that the left and right are both split, although most of the polls have been showing that Brian Bigger is in the lead.
And one last thing on this Sudbury race before we talk about Elliot Lake. Okay, I raise this delicately, but because Ronald Reagan, after all, was President of the United States at the age of, I think, 78, so being in your 70s and having a job in politics is allowed, but John Rodriguez is in his mid-70s, and I, again, heard some whispers up there that, he might be too old for the job. Are you hearing that?
I've heard some people say that either he's too old for the job or he's had his time and it's time for him to move aside. He, of course, is having none of that. He's 78, so he'd be 82 by the end of the term. He says he still feels that he can contribute to the community and this is his best way of doing it. So I think there's some of that feeling. I mean, certainly there's no real young candidates running. There's no somebody under 50 or something running to try to push that they're the young candidate. But certainly John is the oldest candidate running in the election. In between being an MP and being mayor, he was a school teacher, a school principal, and some of his students are actually candidates in this election. So some of them are the youngest, and he is the oldest candidate running.
That is very funny. Okay, good. San, let me get you back in here, and let's talk about the other race you're watching in Peel Region, which is the region just west of Toronto. Mississauga immediately west, Brampton north and west, and the Brampton mayor's race has also turned into a knockdown drag-em-out.
Yes. I think it's fairly well documented. We don't really have to get into too much detail about what's plaguing Susan Fennell.
She's the current mayor.
She's the current mayor. She obviously is dealing with some very low polling numbers, which clearly reflects that the various spending issues and expense issues that she's been dealing with have taken their toll on her popularity.
Well, polls. Remember, a lot of people around Ontario watching this who don't follow it that closely.
They don't follow that.
So,
yeah, sure.
She took Mandarin lessons on taxpayers' expense. She's got a couple of cars at taxpayers' expense. You want to mention a couple of other things
sure.
as well?
For example, the cars. She has a $49,000 a year limo service, 24/7 on-call limo service. She also has about an $85,000 Lincoln Navigator SUV, which costs taxpayers $1,400 a month for the lease.
She was also the highest paid mayor
in 2012. She was the highest paid mayor in the country at $213,000. She was set this year to make $232,000 in 2014. The expense issues, lavish hotel costs, first class or business class, airfare that averaged, there was a forensic audit done by Deloitte. It found that she broke spending rules, her and her staff, 266 times. The average cost of her airfare was more than double the average cost of the economy fare to the same destinations.
Do you think she's got a shot at re-election?
Well, the polls have really indicated that she doesn't have much of a shot. She's hovered between 10 and 14%. The latest poll, she was at 17%. She's now down to 14% in the latest poll.
And
another poll had her at 10. She's been the mayor for
14
years. Just 2 elections ago, she won with 76% of the vote. But again, this is this question. The lack of oversight at the municipal level that allows politicians to get into these problems catches up to them. And the race now, it seems to be between Linda Jeffrey, the former MPP, and John Sanderson, a current city and regional councillor for Brampton. Linda Jeffrey's at about 42% in the polls. Sanderson actually had a huge bump in the last poll, up to 27%. So if he can close the gap in the last week or so, maybe it's a race. Otherwise, it seems to be Linda Jeffrey's to win. But certainly it's been very contentious.
One more word on Mayor Fennell. She thinks your paper's got it out for her. Is she right?
Well, we just report the facts. It's my responsibility to cover Brampton, just like our Toronto City Hall reporters cover Mayor Ford. Mayor Ford's said certain things because of our reporting. Mayor Fennell believes the same because of our reporting. In our position, we simply report on the issues and the facts. If they point in a certain direction, obviously she's defending herself.
And has the paper made any mistakes for which it ought to have been sued?
No, not at all. The paper has said very clearly in response to the libel notice that we stand behind all of our reporting on the Brampton.
She's suing you for libel.
We've received a notice of libel.
Okay.
And we have not received an actual lawsuit yet to see if she'll follow up on her notice. The apology that she wanted, we have not issued it because we believe we are completely correct in our reporting.
Okay. Let's go back up to Northern Ontario. Eric, I want to talk to you about Elliot Lake because, of course, it was in the news very recently with the inquiry having reported on what happened at the mall, which collapsed, killing a couple of people. Here, just before I get you to comment on this, we do have a piece of tape that we want to play here. Here is what the Commissioner, Paul Belanger, had to say about all of that. Roll tape, please.
Although it was rust that defeated the structure of the Algo Mall, the real story behind the collapse is one of human, not material failure. And it is very difficult, ladies and gentlemen, to resist the conclusion that if any one of the owners, engineers, or officials who were involved in the mall over its 33 years of existence had insisted and said, enough's enough, this building will fall and will fail if it isn't fixed, 2 lives would not have been senselessly and tragically lost.
Okay, Eric, give us a sense about how this report and all of the issues surrounding the mall, what kind of impact has that had on the dynamic of the local election in Elliot Lake?
Well, I'd say the biggest impact it's had is that during the inquiry, Justice Belanger didn't focus as much on it in his report, but during the inquiry we learned that Elliot Lake City Council had met in secret for years and discussed many things that should have been discussed in public for years. And the other factor is that the city councilors were all members of the board of retirement living, which is runs the retirement housing, and Elliot Lake, a big driver of the economy, sort of a crown corporation, to borrow a term that's not often used for municipalities. So all the councillors were members of that board, and at one point retirement living was the owners of the mall and handed off to the last owner of the mall before the collapse. So a lot of people in the town came out of the inquiry feeling a massive amount of distrust for council. They let's step back and let this happen while they were collecting tax dollars, and this was good for the economy. So there's a lot of distrust heading into the election out of the inquiry. And then we have the mayor's race. The incumbent mayor, Rick Hamilton, is running, and his 2 main competitors are both city councillors, Tom Farquhar and Al Collette. So voters there are kind of having to decide between people who were all part of these decisions and just deciding who do they blame more for this, for what happened with the mall.
Are there any outsiders that you can see who were not directly affiliated with the mall situation who are challenging any of these incumbents?
There is a 4th candidate for mayor, but they seem to be kind of a distant candidate, not necessarily part of into the race, so that they could take it. In terms of council, there are 24 people running for council, and there's 8 seats on Elliot Lake City Council, and that for a small city, that's a lot of people running. So there's certainly a lot of outsiders running for council hoping to get involved, but for the mayor, it looks like it will be somebody who was on the last council.
Okay, Ashton, let me get you back in here and ask you, one of the truisms, unfortunately, about municipal election campaigns is that the turnout tends to be lousy. Now, we're seeing the first, I guess, smatterings of an all-time high turnout in the advance polls in the city of Toronto. But tell us what you're seeing in London in terms of actual pre-election day interest in this campaign.
Ahead of London, the first day of advance polls compared to the first day last year was up by 60%. So there's a lot of people who, after the last round of council, are really getting involved in politics that we've never seen before. London had a dismal 39.9% turnout at the last 2010 election. And I actually just talked to the city clerk, and she said we're trending to be at a high so far.
Now, I guess you talk to people, and one of the reasons they say the turnout is so low is that they feel that they don't hear anything new. They don't hear anything interesting. They don't necessarily think the candidates are that different from one another, all of that kind of thing. So my question is, have you heard anything, truly interesting that would get people off the couch and motivated to get out there and vote?
I think the fact that we have a councillor going up against a businessman who's seriously never sat on a committee or been to a city council meeting. He doesn't know the process for getting a bridge approved. He doesn't know the process for anything. I think that's getting people talking. I think a lot of people are worried, but I think a lot of people are obviously supporting him because he's in second place in the polls right now. So I think that's the main thing right now, is people are just looking for a change.
In a lot of places in the province, of course, the big issue is public transit. That's certainly the case in the 416 and actually in a lot of the 905 municipalities as well. How about London? Any big debates over public transit?
Gridlock in this city, well, it's not comparable to Toronto. It is horrible. And we have a $300 million plan for a bus rapid transit expansion, but no one knows where that money is going to come from. It's got to come from the federal government. It's got to come from the provincial government. So Paul Cheng's plan is to build a overpass or underpass at every single railroad crossing, but he doesn't know where the money is going to come from. Mayoral candidate Matt Brown's promising to get the BRT going in his first term in the first 4 years, get it running, get the funding secured. So there's plans for transit here. There's plans to make it better, but I don't know if we'll see anything in the next 4 years.
Well, it is a fact that the Deputy Premier of the province holds a London riding. That's Deb Matthews. So presumably the candidates have been meeting with her, or has she been promising anything to whomever wins this thing?
She's been very silent on this campaign. I haven't seen her at any of the news conferences. But London does have a good relationship with the provincial government, and the federal government. We've always been in talks. I mean, we're kind of that bigger city that's not in the GTA. So I don't know how that funding is going to come about, but if Paul Chang's in, he says he's going to get it done.
Okay, San, I referred earlier to the fact that there's public transit, a huge issue in the 416, and even a big issue in Peel region as well. How's it playing out?
It is a big issue. Probably not quite as large an issue as in Toronto, but I would say in Mississauga particularly, because it's such a booming city. 750,000 going to 800,000 very soon. It'll probably get to 1 million, easily within my lifetime. And gridlock, if you're ever driving through Mississauga, it's very bad, especially through some of the thoroughfares that try to get you connected to the GO train stations, etc., trying to get up to the 401. We see actually as much what you would call traffic against rush hour that's coming into Mississauga, which has created essentially its own rush hour, from Toronto into Mississauga, because there's so many people.
The big plan is a light rail
LRT,
transit up the Huron-Ontario
As
Street.
part of the Metrolinx Big Move plan, they're hoping to get it in the second wave of financing and funding, I should say, is an LRT all the way up from the lakeshore at the Port Credit GO train station right up into Brampton.
How much?
The price tag is $1.6 billion.
Who's going to pay
Same
for it?
thing. I had to laugh at one of the budget deliberations in December in Mississauga when they acknowledged that nothing had been budgeted in the city budget. They actually credited the media for pointing this out and saying, well, how are you going to go to the province and ask for funding when you haven't put anything aside in all these years? So they're expecting a big windfall from the federal government and the province, not doing, in my opinion, a very good job of trying to, like York Region, for example. The reason they got their subway extension, the reason they got it on the first wave is because they had the money secured municipally. The region made sure of that. The province then took a look at that and said, okay, you've come to us with your own money, we're going to partner with you. And that's what I think, at least for Mississauga and Brampton, they need to start thinking about this. The reality is, whether you have to finance this externally, whether you have to do other alternative, creative ways of financing it, you have to start thinking about this.
But at the moment, the plan is just let's hope
pray
the
to
province
God.
and the feds
Yeah,
pick
now
up the tab.
I should make it clear, Steve Mahoney, one of the two candidates, he is placing a lot of hope on a private pension investment fund strategy where he wants to go out to the managers who manage these huge pension funds and attract some investment from that pot, globally even. Whether he could be successful, I'm not sure, but at least he's talking about something. I like that.
Eric, obviously they're not talking about building subways or LRTs up in Sudbury, but is public transit an issue there at all?
A little bit. I mean, it's come up a few in mayor's debates. Candidates have been asked questions about it and sort of generally said we need to improve the transit system in the city, but there haven't really been anything concrete, nothing compared to what San is talking about where there are dollar figures and specific plans. There's more sort of a general feeling that the city wants a better transit system, but we're a long way away from even talking about how we would pay for that. And roads in Sudbury are maybe the most political thing we have. We have lots of potholes, we have lots of crumbling pavement, and that is, you talk to voters and almost entirely all of them will say roads and taxes is the number one thing that they talk about. So transit, a little ways down the line, but some people still sure would like to hear politicians talk about it more.
On the issue of taxes then, I'm always curious about this. Is there any candidate anywhere who's promising to raise property taxes above the rate of inflation to pay for programs that people say they want? Eric?
I would say no. I mean, John Rodriguez here has said that to fix our infrastructure, we do need to raise taxes and that city taxpayers have to pay their fair share. He hasn't put a number on it, though, which is probably a wise move. The other candidates are all saying they keep it to the rate of inflation, or as I say, Brian Bigger, the city's Auditor General, says he can achieve a 0% in the first year. But certainly nobody's saying I'm going to raise your taxes and make everything better.
Ashton, how about you?
Paul Chang has said that whatever it takes, he'll spend to get his plan going, but he hasn't put a number on it, and he hasn't even put a dollar figure on his plan for London. Everyone else is pretty much 1% or inflation.
Okay. San, in Peel region?
Same thing. They're all talking about holding it in line with inflation. And, the problem with that is we know when you're facing, for example, like Mississauga, a $1.5 billion infrastructure deficit, if you look at the property tax base, they simply cannot raise enough money. So either you're going to raise user fees, you're going to start cutting capital projects that have been approved or scaling back on ones that are going to be needed, or you're going to have to raise taxes. I mean, there's no magic here in this formula. And obviously in a campaign, no one wants to talk about raising taxes significantly, so they're sticking with the inflation rate. I'm going to be curious to see if they're going to be able to hold it to inflation.
Okay, it's good that we've got you three here because you all three are covering jurisdictions that have had, and I'll be careful with my language here, issues around either corruption or malfeasance or bad behavior, or call it what you want. And I'd like to know how you think all of those things, corruption, bad behavior, malfeasance, whatever, how it's playing out in the campaign so far. Ashton, let me start with you first. We know that your immediate past mayor was found guilty in the courts and is being punished as a result. How is that playing out in the campaign? It's
a major thing in our campaign. Like I said, Paul Chang's the anti-politician, so I think he's getting a lot of support because they voted in a veteran and he was convicted of fraud. And Matt Brown says London's been run like a madhouse for the last 4 years, so we kind of need to get ourselves on track. So everyone is basically marketing themselves as the anti-Fontana. So it's a big issue in the campaign. They're promising transparency, and a lot of people have released their donor lists, things like that.
Eric, given all of the human error involved with the collapse of the mall in Elliot Lake, you would think that malfeasance would be a big issue in the campaign there. Is it?
I mean, I think that's the number one thing people are talking about is whether we can trust this council again. There's been some talk about how the new mall is coming along because council's been promising to build, to help a developer get a new mall up and running because that's a big thing in the community. But yeah, there's a lot of distrust about people wondering how we can trust these people again after meeting secretly and this has happened. But as I said, with three people who were on last council, they don't have much choice. They're going to have to choose who they trust the most.
Okay, San, I know in Mississauga, for example, there have been a lot of allegations flying back and forth about bad behavior and expense accounts and this kind of thing. How's that playing out?
Yeah, actually, in Brampton, Mississauga tends to be sort of typical mudslinging about the candidates' pasts and whatnot. But in terms of behavior while on council at the city, Brampton's really, the city that we need to take a look at. And it's not just the expenses and the spending. It's how was the oversight peeled back? How so easily in Brampton, for example, when they went to essentially an honor system, even Andre Morin, the provincial ombud, has commented on, look how well, sarcastically saying, look how well that turned out, letting the councillors go to an honor system where they weren't having their expenses approved by the treasurer or the finance department.
Which is why the ombudsman wants oversight.
That's why he wants oversight.
He wants it? I'm not sure.
He wants it. I don't think he's got it yet. Bill 8, I don't think has been passed.
Okay.
I mean, it's been tabled. And I've seen actually the 11 schedules that detail what he wants to do. But in Brampton, for example, it was never explained. I even asked the questions. The oversight that had been in place, how was it removed? It doesn't seem to have been removed by an act of council.
But I think Mayor Fennell's position has always been, I've only spent and I've only been paid what the council greenlit.
Okay, there's two problems with that. First of all, she had the balance of power on council. So when she wanted to have certain votes taken, she knew she had the votes lined up with all of her allies. But then even beyond that, if you do manage to get an unacceptable budget in many people's eyes approved for yourself, are you going to spend within that budget responsibly? No one ever knew. There was no line item reporting. Many of the councillors never knew about her limo service. They certainly didn't know about how much she was spending on travel.
But it was within her global budget.
She did spend within the budget that was approved, but there were councillors that had opposed that all along. And when finally, through really media FOIs to find out
freedom of information
requests, what exactly was she spending money on? That's when we found out, wow, it doesn't matter if you were within your limits. It's unacceptable to be spending money that way on the taxpayer's dime.
So are both of her challengers kind of running as I'm Ms. Clean, I'm Mr. Clean?
Very much so. Now, Mr. Sanderson, John Sanderson, the councillor, he also was found to have breached rules to the tune of $1,600 that he has to pay back, and he has said he already paid that back. But compared to the $328,000 that's in question for the mayor, and 266 transactions plus another 79 where she didn't provide enough documentation for, it doesn't pale. So Mr. Sanderson and Ms. Jeffrey are really running on a campaign of accountability. They want sweeping measures. To Ms. Jeffrey's credit, she's called for a lobbyist register. And I think in a city where you've got so much development and growth that's going to take place, you need something like that. You need a lobby registry, for a place where you've got developers who are lining up to get access to City Hall and councillors. You need some oversight over that. It can't be the Wild West.
Gotcha. Let's see if we can get one more issue on the table here in our remaining moments, and that is, I want to talk about uploading and downloading. To you guys out of town, Ashton, I'll start with you first. 15 or so years ago, the Mike Harris government was elected at Queen's Park, Conservative government, and one of the things it did in an effort to get its deficit under control was download a lot of the services that it used to provide at the provincial level onto municipalities. Hard services like welfare payments and social housing costs and things like that. It did upload some educational costs as well, which helped municipalities. But on balance, I think municipalities believe that they have certainly borne the brunt of those changes, and very unhappily so. What's the thinking in London nowadays about how much more needs to be uploaded so that the city can stay afloat?
I think anytime you download something onto a city, it's going to be a major issue. There's a huge waiting list here for social housing, and basically the local government is just floundering, trying to fund this, trying to keep it afloat. So obviously there's issues, and I think the next council is really going to have to take a look at what to focus on and how to delegate and what to hopefully have the province take over.
Eric, how about you in Northern Ontario? Is there a sense that the Liberals, in fairness we should point out, have uploaded some of those previously downloaded services back to the provincial level, so they have given municipalities a break? Is there a recognition of that in Sudbury?
Maybe in passing, but I mean, covering 4 years of Sudbury City Council meetings, they've never missed an opportunity to complain about the provincial government and how they're not giving them enough money. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily about who is running the services, but about how much money the province gives the city to do that. In particular, we had an example with childcare services where the province handed down a multi-million-dollar cut, and the city has had to try to find the money. They've cut back subsidies for low-income families. The city is getting rid of the one daycare in town that it operated. It's going to be operated by other agencies. But there's certainly a lot of displeasure with that, with the provincial government and how they're funding the city. And almost all the mayoral candidates saying, one of my big jobs is going to be to lobby the province and the federal government to give us more money.
San, how about in Peel Region? How much upset still over who does what?
In Peel and Brampton, Mississauga, the issue of downloading is compounded, because not only have you seen costs for certain areas downloaded to the municipalities, the costs that they do get funding from the province for, that they're still getting, are generally based on population formulas. And Brampton, Mississauga's populations have exploded. We're talking about 20% growth every 10 years. It's one of the 1.4 million people right now, half the population of Toronto. And for example, legal aid funding directly from the province to legal aid, in Mississauga, it gets half the per capita legal aid funding that Toronto gets. So what they're saying is, one, we need some of this stuff uploaded, and two, the money we do get, you need to base it on current population figures, because the old population figures, we're not getting our fair share. So that issue of fair share funding for Peel is huge. Mr. Sanderson, John Sanderson, big part of his platform, fair share funding from Peel. Linda Jeffrey, I know she's acknowledged it, and she has said she's going to fight for it, and obviously with her ties to Queen's Park, maybe she can get something done on that.
Well, that would be, you would think, a key plank in her platform is that as a former Liberal Ontario government cabinet minister, she would be ideally placed to lobby the Ontario Liberal government for more money for Brampton. I assume she's beating that drum.
She hasn't talked about it a lot, but I know, speaking to people in her campaign, speaking to a lot of the people in Brampton, even at City Hall, that's the sense that, Linda Jeffrey, I'd have to say this, but Susan Fennell has not had very good relationships with Queen's Park. She's tend to have more of an antagonistic relationship with Queen's Park. The sense is Linda Jeffrey could go in, mend some of those fences, and really get to work with them. But John Sanderson, to his credit as well, he's talked a lot about that as well.
Okay. Eric, let me give you the last word on this. We got about a minute to go here, and that is the further away from Queen's Park you go, it is, it's a truism that people feel more disconnected from Queen's Park the further away you go. And I'm sure that's the case in Sudbury as well, despite the fact that you had a pretty senior and influential cabinet minister in Rick Bartolucci, who was the MPP there for many, many years. But take the temperature of the city right now. How connected or not does it feel from provincial politics right now?
Well, I mean, we just came out of a provincial election where we got rid of the last Liberal MPP for Northeastern Ontario, so we feel very much in opposition. I know there's a lot of people that say that means we're not going to get anything, and a lot of people gave Mr. Bartolucci credit for bringing things to the city that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Maybe not so much things connected directly to the city, but things such as the School of Architecture is sort of seen as a feather in his cap. That's something we was delivered to the city. So I think some people, obviously the voters have chosen to go against the ruling party and went with the NDP for the most part in this region. So it feels somewhat disconnected, and people are wondering to see how our relationship is going to change, because I mean, Mr. Bartolucci, you could set your calendar as a reporter every Friday, you would have some big check to hand out somewhere. So he was definitely seen as that was our connection to Queen's Park, was him delivering those tax dollars. Gotcha.
Eric, I'm coming up to Laurentian University next week. Let's grab a drink while I'm up there, okay?
Sounds good.
Be in touch. All right. Ashton Paitis, nice to have you via Skype from London, Ontario as well. Thanks for joining us. And Sam Graywall, the urban affairs reporter for the Toronto Star for Peel Region. Good to have all of you on the program tonight. Thanks so much.
Steve.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.